I'm so glad that I knew you were about to do something stupid when I hit record, because that meant you got the annoying noise out of the way sooner. Hello there, everyone, and welcome back to DBAle, the Redgate podcast that is all about data and beer, of course. I am your first and, in my opinion, primary co-host, Chris.
And my name is also Chris. Hey, Chris, guess what?
What?
I'll do it again.
No, don't do it again.
I'll do it again.
Don't do it. Bah! Apologies to the eardrums of every listener, young and old there. It's been a while since we did And My Name Is Also Chris, don't you think?
Yeah, it's been a while, but, you know, it's a classic.
Maybe we should change it up and both be Steves one day. Or Kendra. I would love to. I love the name Kendra, and which one of the main reasons probably why I interact with Kendra so much. But like, I would love to be a Kendra.
You could be a Kendra. Why not?
I think the K just Kendra. Anyway, never mind. I'm getting fixated on names.
Yeah. Also, small or little known fact is that my name is actually Steve. It's not Chris. This has just been a trick
just
we've been playing on you this whole time.
You've just ruined our marketing gimmick. Well,
yeah.
It would be about time for us to ruin any marketing gimmicks, because, of course, today is a momentous recording as well, because happy birthday to us.
I did a drum
roll. You were doing a drum roll, not just banging the desk as you always do.
Smashing my face against the desk.
I can't, of course, sing happy birthday because I believe it's protected.
And you can't sing.
And and because I can't sing. But at the same time, yes, that, of course, means that DBAle, much like me this year, has turned 30. Today is the recording of DBAle, the big 3-0.
I mean,
now
for the record, that's 30 years, right?
Oh, I'm turning 30 years this year, but DBL's turning 30 episodes.
Not dog years.
Why? Wait, dog years is... No? I don't know. We're turning 30 episodes. That's the important thing. So, yay, I wish I had a party popper, but unfortunately I don't. Yay!
We spent all our budget on the beer.
We did. It's actually probably a good idea to just tell everyone what we're going to be talking about today. Before we get on to the beer, we don't have champagne to pop, but I'm sure a beer can will do.
Next best thing, though, come on.
Next best thing, we've got some cold beer, so that's all right. But today you can expect Chris and myself to be talking about, well, I believe the theme is it ain't DevSecOps. It's kind of all continuous security, i.e., in our opinion, part of DevOps. It might be an unpopular opinion. Let's see where we end up. Let's see if you agree out there. But we're going to be talking about what we mean by compliant database DevOps. We'll talk about compliance in general and some test data management. I know we've talked about data privacy in the past, and we always do our data breach updates, for which Chris has got some fantabulous updates for you today. But we'll be talking 3. Wow. Okay. And we'll be talking about how certain practices within the database DevOps lifecycle actually help you remain compliant with, say, legislation. And we'll be talking in a more general sense, as opposed to, say, calling out specific articles from, say, the GDPR or POPIA. So that's what you can expect from us today. I think, Chris, that it is about time that we had our champagne moment. As you can see, I have a heart glass.
Can't see because you're blurring.
There you go. I have a glass with hearts on it. And this glass with hearts on it.
Chalice.
You do have a... Wow, that is a chalice. What are you drinking today?
I have a Free Assembly dry hopped wheat beer.
It looks nice. Tell me a bit about it. What is it?
I don't know, but it's got this really funky artwork that is definitely not out of a young child's nightmare. So it is a hazy wheat beer, German style. Sounds good to me. Please don't drink while pregnant.
I mean, you're good, right?
I think I'll risk it.
Fair enough. I today am actually going to be drinking a significantly larger beer than you, which is also being blurred out, which makes it look a bit weird.
I saw the letters O, O, and P.
You did. In fact, I'm going to be drinking a Salt and Pomona Island Shoop Napa. So I believe it's a collaboration between two brewers, Salt, all in capitals, and Pomona Island. And it's this Shoop, as it's known, and I just like saying that, Shoop.
Shoop.
Shoop is a New England IPA, packed and stacked with tropical hop aromas. We dipped into our bag of tricks to bring you a juicy Napa, smooth-bodied and low in bitterness, not shy with the dry hop of Vic's Secret, Enigma, Motueka. Expect aromas of passion fruit, lime, pineapple, and melon. And then literally the last line just says, Shoop, badoop, badoop.
Nice. Lime, passion fruit, and what, sorry?
Passion fruit, lime, pineapple, and melon.
Wow. That's a lot of flavors.
And it is 440 mil, so it's quite big, 440 milliliters. So that is, I don't know what that is in other measures.
It's about a pint, isn't it? I thought a pint's a bit over 500.
568 milliliters in a pint. So it's probably, just 4/5 of a pint. And it's also 6.4%.
Ooh, so Chris is going to get messed up.
Well, considering that I have now lost 17 kilos since the 1st of Jan, I'm hoping that it's going to get me pretty messed up. I mean, I'm hoping that we're going to talk about data.
Nice. Oh dear, this is going to be a controversial one, isn't it?
Here we go.
All right, let's go.
3, 2, 1.
Oh, that made a nice noise.
Oh, Chris. Oh, wow.
Steve.
The smell is just passion fruit and pineapple.
You know what flavor I'd really like in a beer? I've realized today is kiwi.
Lilt. Oh.
Yeah. I don't think I've had a kiwi flavored beer.
If any of you out there happen to know of any kiwi fruit flavored beer,
we're not talking about New Zealanders.
No, just take the hybrid DBA and mash him up into a Pilsner. I don't think he'd appreciate that. All right, here we go. Here's the pour. I was afraid there that I was going to keep pouring because I was so focused on getting the right sound. And look what I did. I have done this is more head than it is beer.
That is a very European pour right there.
Oh, don't let the Europeans hear you say that, Chris. That's not very fair.
If you've ever been to, quite proud of it.
If you've ever been to Cologne and had Kolsch in the little glasses, you'll know that it's not a massive head because, you know, the glasses are very, very small. So you've got to make sure that it's packed full of beer.
That's the Dutch and the Belgian style where they have like the solid amounts of head that
2/3 head.
Really good, in fairness.
That's fine. I'm gonna sample this and see what I think.
I like wheat beer, so that's quite good. As promised, it's a hazy wheat beer, and it tastes like a hazy wheat beer. Yeah, nice.
Wow, that's pretty incredible. I think this is one of my favorite beers that I've ever had. Like, I don't just mean on DBAle. I mean,
ever.
I think I think this is now one of my absolute top 5 favorite beers. Maybe that's one thing we should do sometime, is do a list of our own favorite beers, go completely off tangent.
A DBAle special where we literally just talk about beers.
Yeah.
Why not?
There you go. Sorted. All right. Well, there you go. Wherever you are, producer
The scripts
Louise,
just write themselves.
make a note. Cool. So, yeah, Salt and Pomona Island present Shoop. And Shoop, badoop, is badonkadonk.
Oh, that would be good. Like a special on our favorite of all time beers.
Yeah, are we doing beer or are we including lager in that as well? And if we're going by DBL standards, am I including cider?
I feel like you just have to stick to beer, but lager is a beer, right? So
yeah, true. I think we were talking like ales, but I would happily include some lagers as well.
Anyway,
let's get on to the main topic. So we've got about what, 30, 40 minutes. Let's get into the I don't know, the tempeh of the session, the seitan of the session. I'm finding an alternative for meat of the session.
You were trying not to say the meat of it.
Yes, exactly. So let's get to the body of it. Let's get past the head on the beer and straight for the beer itself. Chris, how do you feel about DevSecOps? Go.
So DevSecOps is I mean, DevOps itself, as much as we all love DevOps at Redgate, it's definitely victim of a lot of buzzwords. Buzzwordy.
Yeah.
A lot of buzzwords that come in DevOps and come with DevOps, and DevOps itself is the mother of all buzzwords.
I mean, to be fair, the IT industry itself is the buzzword giant here. You know, you've just got to shout Kubernetes for everyone's ears to go, oh, did somebody say Kubernetes?
Yeah, like I'm pretty sure you could create quite easily some kind of satirical piece talking about all of the buzzwords in DevOps. And someone must have done already, but like clouds and containers and
I think
DevOps
buzzword bingo is definitely a thing.
It's got to be a thing. But yeah, so DevSecOps is someone taking the already loosely defined thing of DevOps and making the point that security should be a major consideration of it. DevSecOps. So the sec is security.
So here's the interesting thing, right? Is what definition do we use when we talk about DevOps? I think we may have done it in the very, very first or second DBAle. What is the definition that we, not just the two of us, but I guess Redgate as a whole, align ourselves with when it comes to DevOps?
So we always use the definition that is
the Donovan Brown one.
Yeah, exactly. That comes from Donovan Brown, the alignment of people and process. And Chris, finish it off.
Technology.
Yes.
To constantly deliver value to our end users. Now, the interesting thing about that phrase is that if that's what DevOps is, we've got people, and in DevSecOps, we're talking about DevOps with kind of added security, right? Just for those who don't know, we're talking development, security, operations, DevSecOps. Mm-hmm. And a lot of companies out there do seem to be aligning themselves to this DevSecOps principle and saying that, you know, and there's even job roles out there like DevSecOps manager, like all these sorts of things that I've seen recently. And if you think about DevOps, if you think about what DevOps is, people and process and technology by default should encompass good security, right? We should have firewalls. We should have, penetration testing done against our applications and our network. Do you just say giggity to penetration testing? Maybe. All right, I'll go with pen testing. Make sure your biro works. And then you've got process. Now, if you look to any of the world's major regulations on data security and data privacy, right? GDPR, POPIA, California Consumer Privacy Act. You've got the new Privacy Act in Dubai, New Zealand, Australia, Canada, South Korea. All of these major pieces of regulation, right? They all say the same thing, which is you must implement sufficient technical and organizational measures to protect data, right? That's the leading quote. So technical and organizational measures doesn't sound one-off to me, because it's an ongoing thing. To keep protecting data, you need to make sure that you keep doing these technological and organizational processes. Well, that's tooling and that's process. Given that all the major regulations say, this is one thing when it comes to protecting data, when it comes to security, it's process, it's tooling. Well, if it's people and it's process and it's tooling, like in the regulation for good security, that's just DevOps. I don't know. Maybe I'm getting a bit fired up about it.
One problem, I guess, with that word, with that diatribe, is that there was one crucial word that you used, and that's the word should.
Yeah, good point.
So I'm going to argue in the defense of DevSecOps. Maybe as devil's advocate, maybe just because I like picking fights with Chris. So security is something that should be included in that, but sometimes isn't. And so I can see the need for people to call out security specifically, just because they want to make sure it's abided by. It's very, very important, right?
To be fair, I have seen a lot of diagrams. I have seen a lot of diagrams that's like the DevOps kind of Infinity 8 on its side. I've seen a lot of people put security wrapped around that, because you can't put security into any one stage. It's like the enamel on a tooth. Security just is that padlock around DevOps that keeps it nice and tight and nice and secure, which, makes absolute sense. But at the same time, if it's in every part of the DevOps process, by definition, if we have security during develop, during planning, during deploy, during maintain and monitor, it's already in DevOps. Whilst I completely agree with you, I think that it's important that it be called out as an important element. That is what it is, an element. And nobody does DevOps perfectly, because DevOps involves people, and people are by definition imperfect.
Well,
which means DevOps, well, okay, you're fine, Steve, but DevOps can never be perfect because people can never be perfect. So if security is part of DevOps, if we're not doing the security aspect of DevOps perfectly, surely that just means that we aren't doing DevOps as well as we could be, and there are areas within DevOps as a concept that we can improve. That's my argument, is that it's all just DevOps.
That makes sense. I think there's two other points I want to add here.
Oh, dear.
So here's another couple of things to consider. One is that a lot of people would argue that security is the responsibility of everyone, right?
Yes.
Everyone, whether it be
every single person,
individual contributor, developer, front of staff, whatever it is, it's everyone's responsibility. And so DevOps security should form part of that. There should be some awareness to security. So putting sec in there pulls that out. Another one. So another point to consider. Or do you want to mull over that point and then point to consider?
Mulling. Yes. No, go ahead.
So my other point to raise here is so we talk about DevOps as in a way of introducing agile to organizations generally, so operations teams and dev teams, you could define security teams these days as being part of the operations team. I think that's fair in a lot of organizations. So why don't we try and bring DevOps practices to security teams and let them benefit from some of the things that DevOps brings us? So things like increased focus on automation and agile as a practice in general.
So it's almost like if you consider the teams that traditionally would be in charge of the almost siloed job of security, like if we take InfoSec are a perfect example of this. If you think back to the Phoenix project by Gene Kim et al., InfoSec are the people who everyone's like, oh, God, bleh. But you're thinking that DevSecOps is more of a way to include InfoSec in that general decision making and that process, as it were.
Yeah, I guess there's the two sides. One is taking that InfoSec team and looking at what you can apply to that team itself. And the other is then looking to include that team into DevOps processes. So
interesting.
Instead of having a security team, have security members in your development tribes or units or whatever that might be. I do worry though that we're getting a bit navel gazing about this. Like, it's very like DevOps versus DevSecOps. Ultimately, you know, they're two buzzwords really.
I think
I think it's the same thing really.
Yeah, DevOps, exactly. Thank you for proving me right. So, no, but the interesting thing with this is that, you know, there are a number of different ways to look at it. And, you know, I will die on my hill of DevOps is DevOps. And I know there are people who agree with me and there are people who viscerally disagree with me, which is perfectly fine as well. We're all entitled to our opinions, and you're all, you know, anyone who disagrees is entitled to be wrong. But regardless, the point we're trying to make, I suppose, is that, and I think we've both made it, is that good security does come through good process. And there are ways of adopting the process to include good security. So I think that's a really good segue, I suppose, into literally the statement I made at the beginning, which is, what is compliant database DevOps? Well, it's database DevOps, but it's DevSecOps. It's how do I include security and compliance as part of this process? So I guess the first piece of the puzzle, the place that we start with that general, how do we ensure security in our DevOps process, specifically relating to the database? I suppose the first step is test data management, right? Because you can't develop and source control and build and deploy on top of infrastructure that hasn't been created and made available to the devs and the testers. So we've got to talk about the, you know, how does, for instance, provisioning back copies of production databases into non-production environments, how does that fit in? And how do we secure that process specifically, as opposed to, say, a backup and restore? Yeah,
I guess, but you know, there's large parts of it as well. Like test data management is a big thing. But
oh yeah,
we can't ignore the traditional points, like, you know, making sure production is correctly sealed and
yeah, absolutely, making sure the configurations are all correct, that it's been patched, that you know, because that's a big one, right? Is making sure that it's patched, making sure it's up to date, making sure that you've locked down the users. Perhaps not everyone and their mother and the kitchen sink should all have access to production, so that's absolutely a really important point to make. Enabling encryption as well, transparent data encryption, or, you know, other encryption methods are always a good option to explore as well, depending on your production setup. But from there, then, if we're talking about the DevOps process, the actual development side of things for these databases, if we start with the pulling back of environments, kind of the D minus of doing that, I suppose, would be a backup and restore.
Yeah, that's fair. Like you take production, you restore it into dev or test or wherever you need it, and anyone and their mother can basically access that, which is yeah, a problem. And we talk about data breaches a lot. I think I've even said this on the show, but the amount of data breaches which are caused because someone has exposed a copy of production on an exposed dev box somewhere. Yeah, I mean, that's a problem. You're basically giving people copies of production without them needing to access production.
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect for the hacker.
I mean, we can't do anything for the people who found the hard disks in the printers in landfill.
Yeah.
DevOps isn't going to help you there, but absolutely don't expose copies of production data to everyone and the internet. Obviously, that's where it's most at risk. So if the backup and restore is the D minus, then of course we need to think about the actual process itself. So first things first, cataloging and understanding your data, because you can't protect what you don't know you have. You can't put the right protective measures in place if you don't have a good understanding of the thing that you're protecting. So my argument would be that the first step, the first stage to good compliant database DevOps or DevSec database ops, I don't know, is understand what you're looking after by cataloging it and having an ever-evolving idea of, an ever-evolving idea of where that sensitive information sits. Developers add tables, they add columns, they split tables, blah, blah, blah. So...
yeah, awareness is a big part of it, knowing what you have and where. And then if you know what you have and where in your test data set, what do you do with it?
Well, I mean, that's a good question. You could either discard it and just go with an empty set, or probably better is make sure you've got that realistic information in dev test, but so that it doesn't pertain to living individuals. So we've covered this before on DBAle a few times, actually, the masking of production data for non-production workloads. But really the emphasis on data masking is not just so that, we can, a lot of people look at it as, aha, this is the headache that we can get rid of, so we have realistic data, when they should be thinking about it as an absolute necessity, because it's going to protect our data in non-production environments whilst still enabling the development teams.
So get an awareness of what we have, anonymize the data that's sensitive, and we now know where the sensitive data is.
Yeah.
We can give it to our development teams. How are we going to give it to the development teams?
Well, there's a number of different ways. Obviously, you can still, even if you've obfuscated the data, if you've de-identified it in any way, naturally, the best thing to do next would be to in some way make it available. And dev need copies. Testers need copies. You need them for different branches. You need them for different work, for different projects, for different teams. You need multiple test environments so that you've got these multiple test cases, parallel testing environments so tests don't bump heads. There's 1,000,000,001 things that we need environments for. So we need to bear in mind, how do we protect things whilst also making them self-service, whilst also automating the refresh of non-production environments? And for many people, the answer to this is virtualization. By virtualizing a copy of the database and making that available so developers can just pull down a copy, that's their ultimate way of doing it. But of course, the source copy that's being virtualized from is being in some way sanitized or obfuscated.
And I think that the important thing here is that you're defining process that has intrinsically, got those stages in compliance, right? So like, we're not defining a process that has that as an afterthought. It's part of the process.
That's the thing. Build security in from the bottom, from the beginning of the process. Well, if it's all virtualized, then the actual set of data itself, the actual bulk of the physical data, isn't located where we're delivering it anyway. And the second thing is, if it's all sanitized at the very beginning, for the developers, security is an afterthought. They don't have to worry about that. A further step along that would be including the cataloging almost as part of the software development lifecycle and saying, well, hey, not only is it an afterthought for developers, but if developers then add tables, columns, do anything to the data, that can be recorded in an ongoing basis as well. So the cataloging should actually fit in, again, as part of the process, such that if a developer's changes get promoted to, say, an integration environment, someone is included, InfoSec, governance, compliance, DPO, whatever, someone is included making a conscious decision to say, this table we've added is probably going to collect sensitive information. So what we'll do is tag it as such, and that classification will also follow up through the DevOps pipeline, through the CI/CD pipeline, the SDLC, to the production environment. And that information will then feed into further obfuscation, further provisioning of environments, further virtualization, which means that prod need never have anything on it that we don't know what it is or what it holds. So you end up with masking and virtualization, but you also end up with continuous classification, with continuous compliance.
I actually saw a really cool implementation of this, but you referenced like individuals from InfoSec who could do their cataloging, but also the developers could, right?
Oh, so, I totally mean that as well. Yeah, 100%.
Like, developer adds a column. That goes through CI/CD version control, and we'll talk about that more in a second. You deliver that column to a testing environment. The test environment, as part of the test deployment, validates any new columns that have been added against the catalog. And if they haven't been in some way cataloged and defined, then the deployment fails. I really like that. It's a really cool way of just forcing, I guess, someone to make a conscious decision of what that should be classified by.
Absolutely. I think this is one of the things I like about SQL data catalog, is that because there's an API, a REST API, and also a PowerShell module, I can just call out to that as part of a deployment and say, hey, is anything not classified? Fail the deployment. And that's a beautiful thing, because that's what deployment checks are there for, is to make sure that, hey, it's all good.
And then the one thing we skirted over there was version control. Like, version control is ultimately it is or has a key role to play here. Version control in and of itself, we kind of forget about it these days, but a big reason that people wanted version control in the first place is to see who makes which changes.
Oh, and so much audit history.
Absolutely. And if you're smart about this, it can mean that no one can interrupt or insert malicious code effectively after the fact, because everything is validated, audited correctly through version control.
And any drift is detected in later stages, so that any hot fixes or unauthorized changes in later environments is rectified almost instantaneously.
Yeah. Everything gets tracked and recorded. I don't think we need to really talk about that too much more, though. Like, it's fairly obvious and fairly good practice these days. Database version control, really important.
I think you're right, but then I think there's also another layer to it.
Ooh.
I think the other layer to it is, if you think about, again, if we think about regulation, and I'm getting through this beer very quickly. That is all I've got left from the entire can. It's going down very, very easy. As someone who hasn't had a beer since the last DBAle, and this is only my 4th beer of the year, it's really knocking me for 6, but that's a good thing.
Beer of the year. That's a good phrase. Anyway.
Yeah, well, I haven't got a beer of the year yet. I might have a beer of the year 2020. We should definitely do a review of the beers that we had in DBAle in 2020 and include that in our top beers special episode. Anyway, we're mind mapping now. We're coming up with good ideas. It's welcome to DBAle 30, where we talk about compliance and also future DBAles.
This is all we do, like talk about what we're going to do next time.
Exactly. And then we talk about this time next time. And for some reason, listeners continue to listen. Oh, well. But the interesting thing about it is that if you think about what happens when you experience a data breach or a data event, that has to feed back into changes that were made. Okay. We had a data breach. What was the exploit? The exploit was X. We've managed to get to the bottom of that. But why was the exploit introduced? What was the source of that exploit? How long has it been around? That's a massive one. Because when you declare to the governing body of the country that you're in the nature of the data breach that you've experienced, you also have to include information about, how long it's been potentially exploitable.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes a lot of
sense. And source control gives us that visibility, because I can say, nuts, it happened on the contacts table. The contacts table was last changed by blah. There I can see the change in the commit message, and I can go back to that developer, find out about that change a bit more, and also potentially re-educate them. And again, we're not talking blame here. We're talking accountability and granularity when it comes to object level history.
So we have version control. We have ways of provisioning environments. We have the catalog to give us the awareness. The other thing I think we should talk about is the actual automation processes itself.
So much. Yeah.
Can go on about this for a long time, but I think the key crux here is, and you kind of referenced this here, but don't allow anyone to make changes to environments that is outside of the process. Hot fixes is my number one best practice recommendation. Remove hot fixes completely. If you're using something like Azure DevOps, deploy through Azure DevOps. The only user that has access to actually deploy against the target environment is the Azure DevOps deploy agent. And then your security comes from the Azure DevOps platform itself, which you can wrap around with other things to make you feel more happy and secure. And so approvers will deploy changes through that. They can't deploy changes that are outside of the version control deployment process anyway. And no one can introduce anything outside the process. So everything gets introduced through that.
Yeah, that's
process.
Exactly what I was about to say. The interesting thing is, one of the questions I get asked, in fact, two of the questions I get asked a lot as part of our jobs is, number one, how do I roll this back?
Yeah.
And number two is, but how do I handle this insert other random process to do with the database around this? And my answer is always, number one, there are methods of rolling back. But again, depending on which method you decide to go with, it should still be a defined process. And even if it's not a defined process, maybe you decide to roll forwards instead, because actually, when it comes to things like database DevOps, because of things like persistent storage, rolling back doesn't really make any sense except for programmable objects. So that's where it comes in really, really handy to have a good, fast, incremental, lean process that allows you to very quickly and easily spin up a bug fix branch, make a change, commit it, push it, raise a pull request, bish, bash, bosh, shoom, straight through the pipeline, up to prod, and it's fixed. That gives you the audit trail. that gives you the continuous integration. It gives you the proof that the fix works and doesn't just introduce a whole host of new bugs, and it proves that it can be deployed. It's in the process, it's fixed, it's secure, it's compliant.
Boom. And then, well, I guess we've already talking about once it's in production, how to have an awareness of what's in production. So we were, I guess, alluding to sort of monitoring platform. And then once it's in production, then you start the whole thing again. And you've got this nice DevOps process that has security baked in as part of it. So DevSecOps.
Beautiful. Oh, DevOps with a focus on security. I don't think we're ever going to agree on this, Chris, but I appreciate you trying. But yeah, 100%, I think that seems reasonable. Now, before we get into the news, hang on, let's do a good old-fashioned DBAle news introduction. Are you ready? Welcome to... I thought you were going to sing it with me.
Oh.
Okay, ready? And...
The
news
breakdown.
No? That was terrible. You can work on that for next time for DBAle 31.
I feel like you're on a very different wavelength to me there.
I was on a very different wavelength. I don't know if I can.
You were on classical FM.
I like classical FM. Bit of Rachmaninoff, and I'm sorted. Sorry, I don't know why I went like that. Anyway, before we get into the actual data breach monthly, I suppose, which you've been fortunately, very thankfully on my part, doing all the research on, Chris. I appreciate it. Sorry, Steve. There is one thing I should mention as well, is that we actually have a couple of webinars coming up about said compliant database DevOps process.
Ooh.
And it actually includes all of the technology and a discussion on the different processes involved. The webinars themselves, half an hour, like you really don't need much time to go and see these things. But if you go to www.redgate or red-gate.com/events, you should be able to find a link to both a compliant database DevOps demonstration by our good friend and colleague Arne Eskandari.
Oh yeah, and I believe there's another one that's pretty big at the moment. I can't remember who
something
did it.
about provisioning environments. I hear he's handsome. Yes, that's right. It's yours truly. I will, of course, be presenting on Redgate SQL provision and data cataloging as well. So for the preservation and protection of data in your DevOps pipeline. So yeah, if you go to red-gate.com/events, you'll be able to sign up and have a quick look at what's new in the Redgate camp and what's pretty exciting that we've got coming along. So I would definitely say check that out. But Chris, over to you. We've still got a few minutes left. Take us to the bridge.
I have a few quick breaches that I thought were particularly interesting. I'm going to save the best for last, I think. So first of all, I shouldn't say a fairly straightforward one, fairly boring one by all accounts. So a IT operator called Sitter, which does a lot of IT operations work for some of the Star Alliance airline companies. So that's companies like Lufthansa, Singapore Airlines, and United have lost hundreds of thousands of airline passengers' data, specifically frequent flyer data. So
I thought you were going to say hundreds of thousands of passengers' luggage then. Wouldn't have surprised me.
But yeah, this Swiss-based company is effectively at fault here. They have not lost things like passwords or credit card numbers or anything like that, but still some sensitive information. So name and membership number and apparently tier status, which I don't think people are really that precious about.
Well, I don't know. It's more like a mark, isn't it? I heard that I did also see a news article that there was some homes in Los Angeles or something allowing you to, if you were an influencer or you were verified on a platform like TikTok or Twitter, that you could get a customizable blue tick for your house. I'm not sure how true that is. I saw it very, very briefly on Reddit, but it's kind of like a hello, like I travel the most, I'm the most wealthy, I'm etc. etc. So it could be treated as these are the top tier members. They probably have quite a lot of money because they probably travel like business class or first class everywhere. So it could be used for an exploit.
Given we've covered a lot of BA, I thought I'd mention that one. Next one. So this is a lot less of a traditional, someone's got access to the database. There's a company in Silicon Valley called Verkada, which provides essentially a security suite for a lot of quite major organizations. So some of their big clients include Tesla. There's quite a lot of jails, schools, and hospitals that also use this company. Cloudflare is another big company itself that uses this product. And what they provide is things like security cameras and security camera feeds and analysis over the top of that, and an admin view of all of that. And unfortunately, hackers managed to get a super admin access credential to Verkada itself, which they then use to access a lot of live footage from those organizations. So again, healthcare, education, obviously very sensitive, and the big companies themselves. So yeah, they just had live footage of these companies that they could access. Some of this was then released to Bloomberg, and it included specific incidents, which was pretty interesting. Verkada have fixed this now and patched this out now, but 150,000 surveillance cameras were totally in total
compromised.
Access to. Yes. And then the final one, this is my favorite one.
You got a favorite data breach, Chris?
A favorite data breach. So there was a website called We Leak Info, which people might have heard about.
Oh no, I can see where this is going.
Details are a bit sparse on it, but the general agreement is that it was essentially a marketplace for people to sell breached information under the guise of check out whether you've been included in a data breach. So they had a total of 12 billion records. So that's not 12 billion different bits of information. That's 12 billion credentials overall that were captured in their master database. And yeah, the guise of that it came under was pay a fee and see whether your information is captured. In reality, quite a little, it seems a bit more gray than that. The FBI actually seized their servers and the domain itself about a year ago. So there was an international operation that involved the NCA, so that's the National Crime Agency, the FBI, the Department of Justice, the German equivalent as well that I'm not going to try and pronounce, that effectively all came together to seize that domain and arrest some specific individuals involved. There were about 20 people arrested.
Wow.
So that company was seized about a year ago. Then someone realized that the FBI hadn't actually been as judicious in their seizing of those servers as maybe they could have been. And some of their servers were still up is probably the wrong word, but they weren't under the seizure. specifically a payment server related to payments that were made via Stripe. So someone who operates for an intelligence firm specifically, so I guess more of a white hat situation here, they effectively took control of that domain because it lapsed, because the individuals had been arrested. And they then effectively changed the credentials from Stripe that was pointing to that domain. So they just did a basic password reset. So they acquired the domain, password reset on the Stripe account, and then through that got all of the payment details of anyone who paid through Stripe on the WeLeak info website. Wow. So it was about 20,000 credentials leaked from the WeLeak info website. Or sorry, 24,000 payments, totaling to about £92,000. Yeah.
Wow.
So
it's like Inception, isn't it?
Exactly. WeLeak info got leaked, and yeah, there's some questions about the individuals that were on the list of people who would pay for that information from WeLeak info. So yeah, that's the data breach news.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for doing all of that. I really appreciate it. And that's 3 pieces of very much so news for me, very much interesting listening. But sadly, we must draw to a close as our time has ebbed away. And on this, the 30th episode of DBAle. So I think I speak for both Chris and I when I say once again, thank you everyone for listening. We really, really appreciate your support. If you want to see anything in future DBLs, please do feel free to message us on Twitter or via the email address.
I think I also say on behalf of everyone listening, but as it is a special year for you, happy 13th birthday, Chris.
You can keep laughing, but I'm going to be sunning myself on the beach when my 30th arrives, and I know you're envious. So, well, he says fingers crossed and touching wood, but we shall see. We shall see. I've at least I've had my first stab with the old medicine gun, so we shall see where we go from there.
Fingers crossed indeed.
For now, though, thank you so much for tuning in. Always a pleasure to be here with you. And from us at DBL, for the 30 that we've had and for the 30 more, it's cheers from me.
Cheers from me.